Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It's awesome to have you here, and especially for this one. Remember how you mentioned wanting to maybe start your own podcast?
Yeah.
Well, we figured, why not do a deep dive into that whole world, Use those articles and even that podcast script you sent our way.
Yeah, it's a really cool collection of resources. It really shows how much energy there is around podcasts right now. Maybe by the end of this, we'll have you convinced to start recording your own.
Who knows? But some of this stuff we found is seriously mind-blowing. Did you know there are over 460 million podcast listeners worldwide? That's a huge audience just waiting to discover new shows.
That number really stood out to me too. Wow, it makes you realize how important audio has become. It's such a powerful way to connect with people. People listen while they commute, work out, do chores. You can learn and be entertained on your own time.
Right. Okay, so before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's back up a bit.
Yeah.
This script we have basically defines a podcast as like an on-demand radio show. So instead of waiting for something to air, you pick what you want to listen to, whenever, wherever.
Makes sense. And the variety of what's out there is amazing. It's like anything you can think of, someone's probably made a podcast about it.
Seriously.
Which is awesome, actually. It means practically anyone can find their niche, both as a creator and a listener.
Definitely. The script even mentions a few examples, like The Daily from the New York Times. Perfect for a quick rundown of current events.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, and then there's Stuff You Should Know.
Okay.
Which is basically, well, stuff you should know. Random but interesting topics.
I like that.
Yeah, from history to science, even pop culture.
And the fact that you can have two completely different shows like that, both super successful, shows how podcasting works for specific interests.
For sure.
Like, you can find podcasts for hobbies, jobs, even local communities. It's this huge mix of different voices and ideas.
Totally. So you've painted this amazing picture of the podcasting world. But let's get real. Have you ever thought about starting your own show?
Well, after reading all this, it's hard not to. What's interesting is that the reasons for starting one go way beyond, like, fame and fortune.
Right.
It's more about sharing your knowledge, connecting with similar people, having a creative outlet.
Okay, let's break those reasons down a bit. The script lists 4 main motivators. Which one stands out to you?
I think sharing your expertise is a big one. Podcasting lets you build an audience, become a leader in your field, even influence the conversation. It's like creating a platform for your ideas.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially now when personal branding is so important. What about the other reason?
Well, building a community is another big one. Podcasts create these close spaces where listeners feel like they're in on the conversation. They connect with the hosts, and that creates a sense of belonging.
It's true. It's like inviting people into your living room for a chat. That level of connection is rare.
Exactly. And then there's personal growth and creative expression. Podcasting can help you improve your communication skills, push yourself out of your comfort zone. It lets you play around with storytelling and audio production.
So we've seen that podcasting has tons to offer, both for creators and listeners. But for someone totally new, it can seem overwhelming. Luckily, this script gives us a clear roadmap for getting started.
Yeah, it's actually simpler than you might think. The first step is like figuring out your niche and your target audience.
Okay.
It's like building a house. You wouldn't start without a plan, right?
Right.
You need to know who you're making this podcast for and what they'll enjoy.
So once you have your blueprint, you move on to planning episodes.
Right.
This means outlining your content, choosing a format, solo,
Yeah.
interviews, panel discussions. You're structuring conversations to be both informative and engaging.
And that's where your personality comes in. You got to let your passion shine through, be genuine, and connect with your listeners.
I like that. The script also talks about choosing the right equipment, but it also says you don't need a professional studio to start. A decent mic, headphones, and some free editing software can do the trick.
Absolutely. The script even recommends specific mics, like the Blue Yeti or Samson Q2U. Great for beginners and won't break the bank.
Nice.
Don't let the tech stuff scare you.
Speaking of tech, the script stresses recording in a quiet space, to minimize background noise. And it suggests using free software like Audacity to clean up your recordings and maybe add intro-outro music.
Good point. Quality audio is super important. It's the first thing listeners notice, and it can make or break their experience. Think about it. Would you rather listen to a podcast that sounds clear and professional, or one full of distractions?
Definitely not the one with distractions. It takes you out of it, makes it harder to focus.
Exactly. So find a quiet spot to record and learn some basic audio editing. There are tons of resources online, and it's not as hard as it might seem.
All right, it's like any new skill. There's a learning curve, but you get there with practice. And the feeling of making a polished episode is so rewarding.
Totally. It shows your hard work and creativity.
Okay, so we've covered finding your niche, planning episodes, and sorting out your equipment. What's next?
Well, once you've recorded and edited your episodes, you need to share them. That's where podcast hosting platforms come in.
A lot of people might not even know about this step. You can't just upload your files to Spotify or Apple Podcasts directly. You need a hosting platform to store your files and make sure they're distributed everywhere.
Yeah, think of it as your podcast's central hub. The script mentions popular ones like Buzzsprout, Anchor, and Podbean.
Correct.
They handle the technical side, like RSS feeds and submitting your podcast to directories. This lets you focus on making great content.
Nice. And once your podcast is out there, it's promotion time.
Right.
The script highlights social media, newsletters, and good old word of mouth.
Yeah, building an audience takes effort and consistency. Be proactive in getting your podcast out there. Engage on social media, join communities, even reach out to other podcasters for cross-promotion.
It's about building those connections and making sure people know about your podcast.
Exactly.
And the script points out that releasing episodes regularly is key to keeping your audience engaged.
Totally. Imagine your favorite TV show just stopped airing new episodes without a word. You'd probably lose interest, right?
Probably.
Consistency shows your listeners you're dedicated, helps you build a following.
So we've covered a lot. The what and why of podcasting, the practical steps to get started. But like any creative thing, there will be challenges along the way.
For sure. And the script acknowledges that. It highlights 3 main challenges: time commitment, audience building, and those tech glitches that just happen sometimes. We'll dive into those challenges and offer some tips on how to overcome them in the next part of our deep dive. So yeah, let's unpack those challenges, starting with the time commitment.
Right, yeah. It's easy to forget just how much time it takes to make a quality podcast.
Oh, definitely. It's way more than hitting record. You have to, research topics, plan episodes, record, edit, promote. It's a whole process.
And that can be hard to fit in, especially with a job or other stuff going on.
Exactly. That's why time management is key. The script suggests things like batch recording episodes or planning content ahead of time.
Oh, that's smart. So even if life gets busy, you have stuff ready to go.
Yeah, helps you stay consistent, which is so important for building an audience. And speaking of which, that's the next challenge.
I can imagine that's a tough one. Putting all that effort in and not seeing results right away must be discouraging.
It can be, yeah. It's a slow burn. You got to be patient and persistent. Building an audience takes time.
It's not just about waiting for them to show up, though, is it?
Nope, not at all. You have to actively promote your podcast, engage with listeners on social media, build a community around your content.
The script also mentioned being authentic and telling good stories. Like, it's not enough to just give information. You have to make a connection.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the podcasts you really remember. They often have a strong story, relatable experiences, moments where the host opens up a bit and makes you feel like you're part of something.
Right, yeah. It's about finding that balance between giving value and making a real connection with your listeners.
Exactly. Now, the third challenge is, of course, technical glitches. No matter how prepared you are, things happen.
Oh, yeah. Tech has a mind of its own sometimes.
But the key is to minimize those risks. Test your equipment before every recording session, mic levels, headphone connections, make sure your software is working.
Like they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly. And even if something goes wrong, don't freak out. Most audio editing software can fix small things. Background noise, microphone pops, that kind of thing.
So there's always a solution, even if it takes a bit of work. It's pretty amazing how far podcasting has come. From a niche thing to like this global phenomenon. And anyone with a story can do it.
I agree. It's really democratized media. It gives a voice to people who might not have had one before. It creates a space for different perspectives and conversations.
And speaking of different perspectives, the script talks about some super successful podcasts that have found their audience. Shows like How I Built This, Crime Junkie, and TED Radio Hour. Each one offers something unique and appeals to different interests.
How I Built This is so good. It focuses on entrepreneurs and their journeys, and it's like a masterclass in storytelling. The host, Guy Raz, is amazing at bringing out the human side of business success. Makes it relatable and inspiring.
Crime Junkie is another one. It taps into that true crime thing, keeps you hooked with well-researched stories about real mysteries. It shows how powerful storytelling can be.
And then you have TED Radio Hour, which curates those thought-provoking TED Talks covering all sorts of topics. It's for people who want to think deeply and engage with big ideas.
What I find interesting is that all these podcasts, even though they're successful now, they all started small. No huge marketing budgets or famous people endorsing them. They grew organically through word of mouth, consistent content, and a real passion for their topic.
It's a good reminder that success in podcasting, like anything else, comes from hard work, dedication, and wanting to connect with an audience.
It's about finding your voice, getting better at what you do, and putting yourself out there, even if it's scary at first.
And who knows, maybe your podcast will be the next one to connect with millions of listeners.
The possibilities are endless. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's shift gears a bit and talk about you. What's sticking with you the most? What's making you curious?
I think for me, it's how accessible podcasting is. You don't need fancy equipment or tons of money. It's more about passion, creativity, and a willingness to learn and try new things.
Totally agree. That's what this script really emphasizes. It breaks the process down into doable steps and offers practical tips. It's like a roadmap for anyone who's ever wanted to share their voice.
And speaking of voices, it's pretty amazing to think about all the different podcasts out there. Each one is a unique perspective, a story waiting to be heard. From global news to niche hobbies and everything in between, there's something for everyone.
That's what makes podcasting so cool. It's a medium that celebrates diversity, welcomes new voices, and creates a community among listeners and creators.
It reminds us that we all have stories worth sharing, that our voices matter.
So, as you think about all this, what stands out to you? What's making you think, hey, maybe I could do this?
That's what's so great about this deep dive. It's not just about learning information, it's about starting that conversation in your head, that feeling that anything is possible.
Exactly. And that's where I want to leave you today, with a question to think about, a seed to plant. If you could share your voice with the world, what story would you tell? What passion would you share? What impact would you make?
Because in podcasting, the mic is all yours. The platform is ready. The only question is, what will you do with it?
It feels like we've only just begun to explore what podcasting can be. We talked about the steps, the challenges, the amazing examples. But what really stands out to me is the human side of it all.
It's true.
Like connecting with people, sharing stories, building a community.
Yeah, it's about finding your own voice, getting good at what you do, and putting yourself out there.
Exactly. It's about taking that leap and saying, hey, I have something to say. And that's where I want to leave you today, with that feeling that anything is possible.
I like that.
So think about it. If you could create a podcast about anything, what would it be? What stories would you tell? What conversations would you start?
Because the amazing thing about podcasting is the only limit is your own imagination. The tools are there, people are listening, and the platform is yours.
It really is an incredible time to be part of this audio storytelling world. And who knows, maybe someday we'll be listening to your podcast, inspired by this very deep dive.
That'd be awesome.
So until then, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep sharing your voice with the world.
Yeah, because your story matters.
That wraps up our deep dive into podcasting. We hope you found it helpful, inspiring, and maybe even a little life-changing.
It was great diving deep with you as always. And remember, if you have any questions or want to explore this more, just let us know.
Happy podcasting.